Your great-grandparents lived through world wars, economic collapse, and pandemics without smartphones, grocery delivery, or Google. And yet, they were, by almost every measure, more self-sufficient than most of us will ever be. They could grow their own food, fix their own furniture, read the weather without an app, and raise children without a parenting podcast. They knew things, deep, practical human things that have quietly slipped away over the last century. Today, we're bringing those things back. Here are 20 pieces of knowledge your great-grandparents took for granted that most of us have completely forgotten. Number 20. How to preserve food without electricity. Before refrigerators were common, which didn't happen until the 1940s and 50s for most rural American households, keeping food from spoiling was a survival skill, not a hobby. Your great-grandparents knew how to salt and cure meat, how to smoke fish, how to pack vegetables in crocks of brine for fermentation. They knew that a root cellar sitting at 40 degrees would keep apples crisp for months. They understood that fat, lard, tallow, duck fat could seal cooked meat from oxygen and keep it edible for weeks. They canned tomatoes, pickled cucumbers, and put up jam every summer without a second thought. We've outsourced all of this to refrigeration, which means most of us are one prolonged power outage away from losing everything in our freezers. These preservation methods aren't just historical curiosities, they're resilience. And a lot of people are relearning them right now for exactly that reason.
Number 19. How to read the sky. Before weather apps, before weather forecasts of any kind, your great-grandparents looked up, and they knew what they were looking at. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky at morning, sailors take warning. That's not just a rhyme, it's atmospheric science. When light scatters red in the evening, it indicates high pressure and dry air moving in from the west. In the morning, it suggests moisture-laden air approaching from the east. They could read cloud formations. Cirrus clouds high up meant rain in about 2 days. A ring around the moon meant precipitation was coming. The smell of rain, the behavior of animals, the direction of the wind, all of it was data.
Number 18. How to mend and repair clothing. In your great-grandmother's house, clothes didn't get thrown away when they got a hole in them. They got fixed. Darning socks, the art of weaving new thread into worn-out fabric, was a basic life skill. Knowing how to let out a seam when a child grew, take in a waist, replace a button properly, patch a knee, these were things every household member learned young. Fabric was expensive, labor was cheap, nothing was wasted. Today, we live in the era of fast fashion, where it costs more to repair a shirt than to buy a new one. But that math only holds as long as cheap manufacturing holds. The environmental cost of textile waste is staggering, over 92 million tons per year globally. The ability to mend and extend the life of your clothes is coming back, slowly, as a form of both sustainability and quiet resistance.
Number 17. How to cook from scratch. Really from scratch. Not from a recipe box, not with pre-measured ingredients, from raw materials. Your great-grandmother knew how to make bread by feel, adjusting flour and water based on humidity, based on how the dough felt in her hands. She knew how to render lard from pig fat, how to make stock from bones, how to use every part of every animal. She knew that slightly off milk could become cheese, that stale bread could become stuffing or bread pudding, that nothing that could be eaten should be thrown out. The average American in 1900 spent nearly 45% of their income on food. They made it work by wasting nothing. Today, American households throw away nearly a third of the food they buy. Cooking from scratch, truly from scratch, is one of the most powerful things a person can do for their health, their budget, and their connection to what they eat. Number 16. How to navigate without GPS. If you took away someone's phone today and asked them to navigate cross-country, most would be genuinely lost. and not just metaphorically. Your great-grandparents could read a paper map. They knew the cardinal directions instinctively. They could orient themselves by the sun. It rises in the east, sets in the west, and is due south at noon in the northern hemisphere. At night, they could find north by the North Star. Moss grows on the north side of trees. Streams flow downhill to civilization. They also had what we might call spatial memory, a sense of the landscape built from walking through it, not being driven through it. GPS dependency has been shown to measurably reduce our ability to form cognitive maps. Studies show people with heavy GPS use have reduced activity in the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for navigation. We are, slowly, losing an ancient human skill. Learning to navigate without technology is one of the simplest ways to rebuild it.
Number 15. How to grow food. As recently as 1900, over 40% of Americans were farmers. Today, that number is less than 2%. Your great-grandparents knew soil. They could look at dirt and tell you whether it would drain well, whether it needed nitrogen, whether it was too acidic for what they wanted to grow. They understood companion planting, that beans fix nitrogen, that marigolds repel pests, that certain crops should follow others in rotation. They saved seeds, they composted, they knew when to plant by the last frost date and the phase of the moon. The global food supply is heavily concentrated. A handful of companies control the majority of the world's seed supply. A single crop failure, supply chain disruption, or economic shock can cascade into food insecurity remarkably fast. Growing even a portion of your own food, even a balcony container garden, reconnects you to the most fundamental human activity there is.
Number 14. How to manage money without credit. Credit cards didn't become widely available until the 1960s. Before that, you either had the money or you didn't. Your great-grandparents understood envelope budgeting before it had a name. Cash was divided at the start of the week. So much for food, so much for rent, so much set aside for emergencies. They saved before they spent. They understood the difference between a want and a need in visceral, daily terms. They built community credit through relationships, borrowing from neighbors, trading goods and labor, keeping informal accounts with the local store. The average American carries over $6,000 in credit card debt. We've been sold a system in which buying things you cannot afford is not just normalized, but expected. The cash first, save first mentality of our great-grandparents wasn't poverty thinking, it was solvency thinking. And it's making a comeback in communities that have watched easy credit turn into financial devastation.
Number 13. How to build and fix things. In your great-grandfather's world, if the fence broke, you fixed it. If the roof leaked, you patched it. Calling a professional was a last resort, not a first instinct. Basic carpentry, masonry, plumbing, knowing how to swing a hammer correctly, how to read a level, how to drive a nail without splitting the wood, how to mix mortar, how to stop a leak with a washer and a wrench. These were not specialized skills. They were the baseline of being a functional adult in a world where labor was expensive and materials were scarce. There's a shortage of skilled tradespeople in the United States right now that is genuinely alarming. Electricians, plumbers, and carpenters are retiring faster than new ones are being trained. And in our homes, most people cannot identify their circuit breaker, don't know where the main water shutoff is, and have never picked up a handsaw. We have confused convenience with capability, and those are not the same thing. Number 12. How to sit with silence. This one isn't practical in the mechanical sense, but it may be the most important thing on this list. Before radio, before television, before the internet, evenings were quiet. Families sat on porches. People read. They talked. They rocked in chairs and watched the light change. They were comfortable, genuinely comfortable, doing nothing in particular. Silence was not something to be filled. It was where you rested, reflected, and recovered. Research on constant digital stimulation is unambiguous at this point. We are in an anxiety epidemic. Attention spans are collapsing. The average American checks their phone 96 times per day. We have lost the ability to be bored. And boredom, it turns out, is essential for creativity, emotional regulation, and mental rest. Our great-grandparents weren't meditating in a fancy app. They were just sitting outside. That was enough.
Number 11. How to deliver basic medical and first aid care. Doctors weren't always available. Hospitals weren't always nearby. In rural communities, you handled what you could. Your great-grandmother knew how to set a splint, clean and dress a wound to prevent infection, use a poultice for drawing out swelling, recognize the signs of serious fever versus manageable fever, and assist in childbirth if necessary. She knew herbal remedies, not as mysticism, but as practical medicine. Yarrow for bleeding, elderberry for fever, ginger for nausea. We are deeply dependent on a medical system that has significant gaps in rural and underserved areas, and that can be overwhelmed in emergencies. Basic first aid and medical knowledge, the kind that keeps a bad situation from becoming a fatal one while you wait for help, is something most people have never learned, and it could, one day, be the difference.
We're halfway through, and before we continue, I want to say something. This video isn't about romanticizing the past. Life in the early 20th century was hard in ways we've rightly moved beyond. Infant mortality was devastating. Preventable diseases killed people we could save today. The physical labor of daily life was exhausting. What we're talking about is specific knowledge, capability that has quietly been traded away as convenience became available. Some of that trade was worth it. Some of it we're only now starting to count the cost of. Let's keep going.
Number 10. How to raise children in a community. It takes a village is so overused it's lost its meaning, but it used to describe something real. Children in your great-grandparents' era were raised by a community, not just parents. Neighbors, extended family, church members, teachers, all of them had standing to correct, guide, and care for a child. Children had responsibility early. Chores, errands, younger siblings to mind. They were considered small adults in training, not fragile beings to be protected from all difficulty. The rise of the nuclear family, geographic mobility, and hyperparenting has produced a generation of young adults who struggle with adversity, autonomy, and delayed gratification in ways that are measurable and well documented. There's no single cause, but the collapse of village-style child-rearing, the idea that community has a shared stake in children, has left parents isolated and children without the resilient foundation that difficulty, responsibility, and multiple caring adults actually builds. Number 9. How to live within the seasons. Your great-grandparents ate strawberries in June, not in January. Not because they were food snobs, but because that was when strawberries existed. Life was organized around the calendar of the natural world. You planted in spring, cultivated in summer, harvested in fall, and conserved in winter. Your diet changed with the season. Your work changed with the season. Your pace changed with the season. Winter was slower, darker, quieter, and that was not a problem to be solved. It was a rhythm to be lived. We have built a civilization that has almost completely abolished the experience of seasons. Supermarkets have the same produce in January and July. Our work schedules don't change. Our lighting doesn't change. Our pace doesn't change. And we are paying for that disconnection in disrupted sleep, metabolic disorders, and a kind of low-grade restlessness that we can't quite name because we've never lived any other way. Number 8. How to write really write. Not text messages, not emails, letters. Your great-grandparents wrote letters, long, considered, beautifully constructed letters. They thought about what they wanted to say before they wrote it. They chose words deliberately. They understood that a letter represented you, your intelligence, your care, your character, in your absence. Penmanship was a skill taught seriously. Epistolary friendship, relationships maintained entirely through correspondence, was a normal and deeply meaningful form of human connection. The ability to write clearly, persuasively, and with genuine feeling is one of the most valuable professional and personal skills a human being can have. It is also in measurable decline. Students today write more than any generation in history, texts, posts, captions, and are simultaneously less capable of constructing a coherent argument in prose. The kind of slow, deliberate writing that letters required was also a form of thinking, and that thinking is getting harder to do.
Number 7. How to manage grief. Death was present in your great-grandparents' world in ways it simply isn't in ours. People died at home. Bodies were laid out in the parlor, which is actually why we started calling it the living room, as a way of moving away from that association after the Victorian era. Community rituals around death were elaborate and communal, sitting with the body, wakes, formal mourning periods, black clothing for a year. Grief had a socially recognized structure. People were held by their community through it, and the community acknowledged that something real had been lost. We have medicalized, professionalized, and privatized death almost completely. Most people die in hospitals, surrounded by strangers. Funerals have become brief and often awkward. The mourning period has been compressed to a long weekend, and we are left very often to grieve alone, which grief researchers consistently identify as one of the most damaging things you can do to a human being in profound loss.
Number 6. How to entertain yourself and others. Before screens, entertainment was something you made. Families gathered around the piano, people told stories, real stories, long stories, family stories told and retold until they were polished smooth. They played cards and board games. They sang together, not performatively, not for an audience, just because singing together felt good. They danced at community gatherings. They read aloud to each other. They put on amateur theatrical productions in their barns. Passive entertainment consumption has reached extraordinary levels. The average American watches over 4 hours of television per day, in addition to significant time on social media. The human need for play, creativity, and shared performance hasn't gone anywhere, but we've outsourced the fulfillment of that need to content platforms. And research increasingly suggests that passive consumption does not satisfy the social and creative hungers that active participation does. The loneliness epidemic and the entertainment glut are not unrelated. Number 5. How to work with your hands. There is something that happens in the human brain when you make something with your hands. Neuroscience has confirmed what your great-grandparents simply knew. They wove, they carved, they knitted and crocheted and quilted. They made furniture, they built walls, they made soap and candles. They shaped clay and forged iron. Every household produced things, not just consumed them. And the making of things, the long, slow, skilled process of turning raw material into something useful and beautiful, was a source of deep satisfaction that modern psychological research now calls autotelic experience, work that is its own reward. The rise of craft culture, maker spaces, woodworking YouTube, hand embroidery, sourdough, is not a trend, it's a hunger. People are trying to recover something that the knowledge economy has taken from them, the experience of making something real. Your great-grandparents had that experience every day without thinking about it. It made them, in certain measurable ways, more mentally resilient than we are. Number 4. How to disagree without destroying the relationship. Small towns and tight communities in your great-grandparents' era had no social media, no block button, and no ability to simply disappear from a disagreement. You had to work it out. The person you argued with at the town meeting was also the person who might help you bring in the harvest, whose children would grow up alongside yours, whose family you might need to borrow from when things got hard. Conflict had to be managed, not escalated. People developed real skills of negotiation, compromise, face-saving, and the long game, keeping a relationship viable for decades, even through genuine disagreement. Social media has created an environment where the most emotionally satisfying response to disagreement is escalation and separation. Block, unfollow, cancel. But we have carried this dynamic into our physical communities, our families, our workplaces. The skill of productive, relationship-preserving disagreement is atrophying, and the communities that can no longer disagree without fracturing are communities that cannot function.
Number 3. How to read a person. Before psychology had a vocabulary for it, your great-grandparents were highly skilled at reading people. They watched for honesty in a handshake, reliability in how a person handled a small obligation, character in how someone treated those beneath them in station. They read body language and tone the way we might read a text, fluently, quickly, with layers of meaning. They knew who in the community was trustworthy and who wasn't, and that knowledge was built over years of close observation and shared experience. We conduct a staggering proportion of our most important relationships, business, romantic, civic, through text and screens, where the richest channels of human communication are simply unavailable. We have become worse at reading people in person because we spend so little time doing it. And the consequences show up in epidemic loneliness, romantic dysfunction, workplace miscommunication, and a generalized sense of disconnection that no one has quite found the words for.
Number 2. How to accept hardship. This is a hard one to talk about, but it's important. Your great-grandparents experienced genuine, unavoidable hardship, and they had a framework for it. Religious faith was part of that for many, but beyond faith, there was a cultural understanding that suffering was a normal part of life, not a sign that something had gone wrong with the universe, that crops failed sometimes, that people died young, that winters were cold and work was hard, and that your character was built precisely by how you bore those things. We have built a consumer culture organized around the elimination of discomfort. Every friction, every weight, every difficulty is now a problem with a product solution. And we are producing, measurably, a population with declining stress tolerance, rising anxiety in response to manageable obstacles, and what some researchers call fragility. Not weakness of character, but a lack of practice with the ordinary difficulties of life. Your great-grandparents were not tougher than you. They just got more practice.
Number 1. How to know your neighbors. This last one is so simple, it's almost embarrassing, but it might be the most important of all. Your great-grandparents knew their neighbors, not their social media profiles, not their cars, not a distant wave from the driveway. They knew their names, their children's names, their struggles, their skills. They knew who was good at what. They helped when someone was sick, when a crop failed, when a husband left or a wife died. They were, to one another, a genuine safety net, the original social insurance. A 2021 survey found that over a third of Americans do not know any of their neighbors by name. In cities, that number is even higher. The collapse of neighborhood as a meaningful social unit has happened so quietly and so recently that we don't quite feel the hole it's left until the power goes out, or we get sick, or we realize there is no one within walking distance we can call. Community is not nostalgia, it is infrastructure, and ours has been quietly falling apart.
20 things. 20 pieces of knowledge that your great-grandparents held as basic, ordinary common sense, and that we have allowed to slip away in the space of a century. None of them require you to go back in time. None of them require you to give up what's good about the modern world. But all of them are recoverable. You can learn to grow food. You can learn to mend a seam. You can learn the clouds. You can sit in silence. You can go meet your neighbors. The knowledge isn't gone, it's just been set aside. And the people who pick it back up, quietly, practically, one skill at a time, are building something that this moment genuinely needs. The ability to take care of themselves and the people around them, regardless of what the world does next. That's what your great-grandparents knew. That's what they'd want you to know, too. Which of these hit you hardest? Leave it in the comments. And if this video made you think, share it with someone who'd appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you in the next one.